In the glow of first class, Naomi Carter and her child settled into 2 Amperes. They are the only black passengers in this airplane, so it's not surprising that every glance treated them like they didn't belong. "Step aside," Tracy snapped, her voice sharpened by authority, aiming at the mother and child. When Naomi refused, the uniform turned violent, one slap in front of her child. Naomi didn't fight back. She sat still, eyes fixed, absorbing the sting. But 12 minutes later, the truth flipped the cabin upside down. The passenger they humiliated owned the leverage to ground the plane mid-move. By landing, the airline itself was bleeding. How fast can one slap in a cabin become the scar that rewrites an entire airline? Where are you listening to this story from? Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe now so you never miss the next one. Now, let's begin. The jetway door sighed shut behind them, and the hush of first class settled like heavy velvet. Naomi Carter adjusted the strap of her carry-on and guided her daughter forward, the carpet so thick it swallowed the small sound of Amira's sneakers. The cabin lights were tuned to a flattering dusk. Glass dividers caught the glow and turned it into soft bars across the aisle. People looked up. They always looked up. "Eyes forward, Peanut," Naomi murmured. Amira pressed closer to her hip. 6 years old, and already reading rooms the way other kids read picture books. "Is it the quiet section?" she whispered. "It's the polite section," Naomi said. "We'll see if it lives up to its name." At the far end, Tracy Holloway stood as if she'd been poured into the aisle. Neat chignon, neat smile, the kind of posture trained by a decade and a half of telling adults where to put their elbows. Her glance passed over Naomi and Amira, then looped back with interest that wasn't curiosity so much as inventory. From seat 3C, a man in a must suit and self-satisfied slouch pivoted slightly, one ankle lolling over his knee. "Are they lost?" he said, pitch perfect for an overheard aside. White, 50-ish. The tailored irony of someone who thought the cabin was his living room. Naomi didn't break stride. She located 2 Amperes, set the bag into the overhead with a clean, practiced motion, and buckled Amira into the window seat. The child traced the shape of the wing with a fingertip on the plastic shade. Naomi's face didn't flicker. It almost never did. A chime tinked. From the galley, a younger attendant hovered beside Tracy, tablet against her chest like a shield. Sarah Lynn's eyes were quick and unsteady, the kind that wanted to do the right thing and also wanted to survive the day. "Welcome aboard," Tracy said, stepping in with a refined warmth that could freeze water. "May I see your boarding passes and identification, ma'am?" Naomi glanced up. "You may," she said, producing both. The movement was calm, not defiant. The calm itself acted like a barrier. Tracy received the documents and inspected them as if they might confess. "And for the child as well?" "Amira Carter," Naomi said. She slid a second pass across. "We're in 2 Amperes and 2B. Behind them, 3C exhaled a laugh. "I fly this route every week," he told the air. "Never seen them before." Sarah's thumb hesitated over the tablet. The manifest glowed back, indifferent, factual. "Naomi Carter. 2 Amperes. She read under her breath. "Accompanied minor. 2B. Her eyes lifted, met Naomi's for a second, then dropped. The cockpit door was a quiet gray slab. On the other side, switches clicked like restrained insects. "Cabin cockpit," came Captain Mills, voice low and sanded, the interphone compressing it into something clinical. "Finalizing pre-flight. Call when ready." "Copy, Captain," Tracy replied, not looking away from the IDs. "We're conducting a brief verification." Amira's legs dangled, not reaching the footrest. "Mom," she whispered, "are we okay to sit here?" "We're exactly where we belong," Naomi said, tone soft enough that only Amira could hear it. Tracy returned the cards by their corners. "Thank you, and if I could just have a quick look inside the carry-on for any restricted items." Naomi's hand closed over the bag handle. "You may not," she said, polite as a knife. You have my compliance where policy requires it. It does not require that. Sarah's head tipped toward Tracy. Manifest is correct, she said carefully. Everything matches. 3C let his ankle fall, shoe tapping the bulkhead. It's cute, he said. The near whisper meant to travel. First class as a field trip. Naomi didn't look at him. She retrieved a paperback from the pocket, slid a coloring book into Amira's lap. The girl opened to a page of clouds and engines, and chose a crayon like choosing a spell. Ma'am, Tracy said, syrup thinning, we have a lot of passengers to prepare. Cooperation keeps everything smooth. I've been exceedingly cooperative, Naomi said. And you're delaying everyone. The cabin's soundtrack sharpened. Roller bags thumping into bins. A seatbelt clacking shut. Ice shifting in a metal scoop. Down the aisle, a man cleared his throat in the theatrical way that announces a complaint approaching. First class performed its rituals of patience. Sarah angled the tablet so Tracy could see it again. Boarding complete -2 in economy, she reported. Gate shows green for 2 amperes and 2B. Tracy kept her voice low, the volume that feels like a courtesy and functions as pressure. We have to ensure the premium experience is maintained. The premium experience, Naomi said, is a seat that reclines and people who mind their own business. Sarah almost smiled, then didn't. She looked toward the cockpit, where American airspace ran in neat lines across a display, oblivious to any social tension in row 2. Cabin, cockpit, mills again, a faint crackle under the consonants. 10 minutes to push. Report if you need additional time. Stand by, Tracy said. She leaned in slightly, her shadow falling across the coloring book. Ma'am, I'll need to confirm how these seats were purchased. Naomi shifted, putting herself between Tracy and the child, without making it look like a move. With money, she said. 3C's laugh was a short, pleased bark. Good one. Sarah flinched at the sound. Tracy, she whispered. We could do this after takeoff. Tracy's eyes never left Naomi. We set the tone now. She raised the interphone, her smile back on like a badge. Operations. First class lead. Requesting ID check. Confirmation for 2 amperes. And 2B. In HQ, hundreds of miles away, Victoria Race's dashboard would register a tiny ping that didn't trouble the room. Here, only the faint click of Tracy's earrings shifting gave away her pulse. Amira pressed a cloud-shaped crayon down too hard. It snapped with a soft, surprised sound. Naomi took the broken half, slid it back to her. Clouds come in pieces anyway, she said. Tracy waited, head tilted to catch the reply in her earpiece. The cabin watched without appearing to. It's an art form, that kind of watching. It leaves no fingerprint until someone asks who saw what. The interphone hissed acknowledgement. Sarah breathed out. Mills's voice threaded back in, calm as runway lights. Cabin, cockpit, copy the delay. Keep me posted. Naomi met Tracy's gaze and held it. Nothing theatrical in it. Nothing that could be quoted later as provocation. Just 2 people measuring a distance neither of them had chosen. She had no idea every glance would soon become a witness. The hum of the air system filled the silence. Naomi Carter adjusted Amira's collar and let the child's head rest against her sleeve. Across the aisle, Tracy Halloway was still poised with the interphone, her smile polished to hide the edge. Thank you for your patience, ma'am, she said, voice crisp as a folded napkin. We'll just complete a quick verification before departure. Naomi folded her boarding pass back into her wallet. You already did, she replied evenly. Sarah Lynn lingered nearby, tablet glowing faintly against her uniform. Her eyes darted between Naomi and Tracy like someone caught in a crossfire she couldn't name. She tapped the screen, flicking through the manifest again, lips moving in a whisper only she could hear. 2 amperes. Naomi Carter. 2B. Amira Carter. The green check marks pulsed with bureaucratic indifference. Behind them, the man in 3C leaned forward, resting his elbow on his knee. "I've been flying this route for years," he said, his tone rehearsed for maximum audience. "Never seen either of them. Funny how people appear in first class these days." Amira stiffened at the words, and Naomi's arm curved tighter around her. She didn't look back. "We're in our assigned seats," she said, voice pitched low enough for her daughter's ears. Sarah's fingers hovered over the tablet screen, her mouth opening, then closing. Her throat worked like she had swallowed the wrong word. Tracy held her smile, but the corners of her eyes narrowed. "Sir," she said toward 3C, "please remain seated." The words sounded like courtesy, but landed like approval. 3C smirked, satisfied he had been recognized. "Just trying to keep the cabin standard," he murmured. Naomi pulled Amira's coloring book back onto her lap. The broken crayon pieces from earlier rattled faintly against the tray table. She handed one half to the child and let silence be her answer. In the cockpit, Mills leaned back in his chair, scanning dials. He toggled the interphone. "Cabin, cockpit, status, still verifying 2 passengers." Tracy responded. "Routine check?" Mills's tone was bored, professional. "Yes, Captain. Just ensuring compliance." "Copy," Mills said, switching back to his pre-flight sequence. To him, it was another checkbox. At headquarters, Victoria Reyes leaned over her desk. A notification blinked across her screen. ID verification delay. Flight 448. She brushed it aside with a keystroke. Small ripples never concerned her. The ocean always had more. In the cabin, Tracy angled herself so her figure loomed slightly into Naomi's space. "I'm sure you understand. Premium service requires vigilance." Naomi smoothed Amira's hair with one hand. "Premium service," she said, "is letting people sit in peace." Sarah's breath caught. She turned the tablet toward Tracy again, the glow washing her face pale. "It's confirmed," she said softly. "Everything matches the manifest." Tracy's eyes flicked down, then back to Naomi. The smile remained, but it no longer touched her voice. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll note that." 3C chuckled under his breath. "Polite resistance, always entertaining." Naomi closed her wallet with a snap that was louder than her words. "My daughter doesn't find it entertaining," she said. For a moment, the cabin seemed to listen harder. The ice clinking in glasses, the hiss of the air vent, the unspoken tension passing like a ripple from seat to seat. Sarah swallowed, lowered her tablet, and took a step back. She wanted to say something else. Wanted to, but the weight of Tracy's presence and 3C's smirk pressed the words down into her chest. Naomi's eyes stayed level, calm, unshaken. The hush that followed her voice felt loaded, as though the walls of the cabin themselves were waiting for someone to push harder. Beneath the courtesy, a fuse was already lit. The overhead lights dimmed to their pre-departure glow, a stage cue nobody had rehearsed. Naomi Carter kept her posture composed, one arm around Amira, who was scribbling slower now, coloring clouds with hesitant strokes. The silence around their row was too sharp, like air before a storm. Tracy Holloway adjusted her blazer and crouched slightly beside Naomi's seat. Her smile was the same, but the angle of it cut different. "Mrs. Carter," she said with a tone wrapped in velvet but lined with steel, "are you sure you're seated correctly? Sometimes ticketing errors place passengers in the wrong class." Naomi's gaze didn't flicker. "I'm exactly where I belong." 3C leaned closer across the aisle, his voice pitched for everyone within earshot. "I fly this route every week. Never once seen either of them. Not in these seats." His smirk hung like perfume, invasive and unasked for. Sarah Lynn's hands tightened around her tablet. She stared at the manifest again, the green check beside Naomi's name glowing like a small truth too fragile to protect itself. Her lips parted, but Tracy's presence sealed them shut again. Amira dropped her crayon. It rolled across the tray and onto the carpet with a faint thud. She pressed into her mother's side, whispering, "Mommy, why are they looking at us?" Naomi tilted her daughter's chin gently. "Because they don't know any better," she said softly. Then, louder, to Tracy, "We've been verified. Unless you plan to move everyone in first class to a new seat, we'll remain here." Tracy's jaw flexed beneath her professional veneer. "It's unusual," she said, voice carefully neutral, "to encounter passengers I'm unfamiliar with in this section. We value consistency." 3C gave a low laugh, nodding as if Tracy had voiced his private thoughts. "Exactly. There's a standard. You can't just appear." The words landed heavier than intended. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, the choreography of people trying not to be involved but listening with full attention. Sarah's tablet trembled slightly in her hands. She looked at Naomi, then at Tracy. "The manifest," she began, voice thin. "It's accurate." Tracy straightened, turning her head sharply. "Thank you, Sarah," she said in clipped tones. "Trust. I'll handle it." Sarah's throat closed. She took half a step back, heat crawling across her face. Amira's small fingers clutched Naomi's sleeve. Her eyes were round, her voice a fragile thread. "I don't like it here." Naomi stroked her daughter's hair, steady, protective. Her own expression stayed level, but the muscles in her hand betrayed their tension. Up front, in the cockpit, Captain Mills tapped the screen displaying the cabin feed. A soft click, then the view of first class bloomed across his monitor. Tracy standing over Naomi, the man in 3C leaning forward, Sarah shrinking into the aisle. Mills's brow creased. "Cabin, cockpit," he radioed, tone calm but edged. "Report reason for delay. Timeline stretching." Tracy lifted the interphone. "Routine ID confirmation, Captain. Nearly resolved." "Copy." Mills's voice was dry, but his finger hovered near a key to start recording the exchange directly. Something in the stillness didn't smell routine. Hundreds of miles away, Victoria Reyes scrolled through her dashboard. Another alert blinked. Passenger verification. Ongoing. She sipped her coffee, unconcerned. Cabin drama rarely reached her desk in a way that mattered. Back in row 2, Tracy folded her arms. Her polished tone was starting to splinter. "Mrs. Carter, if there's any irregularity with your ticketing or payment source, now would be the time to clarify." Naomi raised her chin. "And what irregularity do you imagine?" The pause that followed was dense, electric. Amira pressed her face into Naomi's sleeve, hiding. Sarah's breath hitched audibly, a tiny betrayal of the tension rising. Then, Tracy asked the question quiet, deliberate, that cleaved the air in two. Who paid for these seats? The question still hung in the air. Who paid for these seats? When Amira whimpered and shifted closer into Naomi Carter's side, the child's coloring book slid off the tray with a soft slap against the carpet. Naomi bent, picked it up, and set it back with deliberate calm. Her voice was level, quiet, almost tender. "Enough. You don't address my daughter. You address me." Tracy Halloway didn't move away. Her eyes were narrowed to disciplined slits, lips drawn tight over her polished smile. "Mrs. Carter, you will not dictate how I conduct this cabin. I am enforcing procedure." Naomi tilted her head, not rising to the bait. "There's no procedure that involves intimidating a 6-year-old. She pulled Amira gently behind her arm. "Stay with me, sweetheart." The movement, small, protective, seemed to ignite something in Tracy, as though the quiet refusal had stripped away the layers of etiquette she'd been clinging to. In one sudden, brittle motion, she raised her hand and struck Naomi across the cheek. The sound cracked the cabin open. A gasp rippled through the rows, sharp and collective, like air sucked from the room. Amira yelped and clutched her mother's waist. Naomi didn't stagger. She pressed her palm briefly against the mark blossoming on her cheek and lowered it again. Her eyes locked on Tracy's with a steady, burning composure. From across the aisle, 3C leaned back with the relish of a spectator at a show. "Good," he said, loud enough for everyone. Someone had to say it. No one else spoke. The silence was a prison. Passengers stared into books or headrests, pretending they hadn't seen, but their stillness was a confession. Sarah Lynn stood nearest, her body rigid, mouth open. Her hands had gone slack around her tablet. The device nearly slipped from her grip. Her eyes were wide, wet, unblinking, an unwilling camera that recorded everything. "Ma'am," Tracy said, voice breaking into harshness she couldn't control. "You are non-compliant." That strike was necessary for order. Her chest rose and fell fast beneath her uniform, betraying her calm facade. Naomi touched Amira's curls, whispered something inaudible into her daughter's ear. The child buried her face deeper into Naomi's arm, trembling. Naomi's gaze never left Tracy. At the front of the aircraft, Captain Mills's headset lit with an automated ping. Security flag level 2. Physical altercation reported. His hand froze over the throttle switch. "Cabin cockpit," he said into the interphone, voice dropping into hard authority. "Explain the flag." Tracy's hand shook slightly on the handset. "Cabin disturbance, Captain." Passenger became aggressive. Mills's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the live feed, watched the image of Naomi seated calmly with her daughter, Tracy looming over them, Sarah, frozen, in shock. He tapped a command. "Direct cabin monitoring." Initiated. Sarah's lips parted, but no sound came out. She could only watch Naomi stroke Amira's hair with quiet steadiness, the red mark on her cheek a visible brand of the blow. The cabin had stopped pretending. Every glance was fixed, though no one dared speak. A fracture had split open between authority and truth, wide enough to swallow the entire room. And with one strike, the rules of the cabin changed. Naomi Carter's cheek still burned where Tracy Holloway's hand had landed. The air in first class felt heavier now, each second thick with the weight of stares and unspoken judgment. Amira clung to her sleeve, small fingers tight, refusing to look up. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She reached into her bag, produced a slim phone with a polished black case, and slid her thumb across the screen. The gesture was casual, precise, but every eye in the cabin followed it. "Who are you calling?" Tracy demanded. Her voice pitched louder than she intended. Naomi didn't answer her. She pressed one button, a number already programmed, and lifted the phone to her ear. Far away, in a glass-walled control room, Victoria Reyes's headset buzzed. She glanced at her monitor, an incoming call from a shareholder direct line. Her posture shifted instantly. This wasn't passenger services. This was board-level priority. "Victoria Reyes," she answered crisply. "Naomi Carter," Naomi said, voice low but steady enough to carry through the cabin. "I'm on flight 448, first class. There's been an incident." Victoria blinked. She hadn't expected this name. "Miss Carter, I'll need specifics. Can you confirm your manifest position?" Naomi's gaze swept to Sarah Lynn, still clutching her tablet like a lifeline. "Sarah," Naomi said softly, "would you please confirm for Miss Reyes where I am seated?" Sarah's throat bobbed. She glanced at Tracy, then down at the tablet, the glow trembling against her fingers. "Manifest shows Naomi Carter in 2 amperes, she said, voice almost breaking. "Accompanied minor. 2B. Victoria's tone sharpened. "Noted. Miss Carter, remain calm. I'm initiating protocol review," she signaled across the operations floor, drawing 2 legal advisors closer. In the cockpit, Captain Mills's radio crackled with the alert. "Cabin, cockpit," he said, voice clipped. "Receiving report of shareholder contact. Status?" Tracy lifted the interphone. "Cabin secure, Captain. No escalation. Routine under control." Her words were brittle, but Naomi's voice followed, carrying into the silence of the cabin. "That's inaccurate, Captain. I was physically assaulted by your crew while seated correctly. My daughter witnessed it." The interphone hissed as Mills exhaled. His eyes swept the instruments, then the live feed of row 2. He toggled a switch. "Copy. Holding position. No taxi clearance until resolved." His hand reached for the checklist. This was no longer routine. Around them, other passengers shifted uneasily, their curiosity breaking into murmurs. 3C, still sprawled in his seat, raised his voice above the whispers. "She's exaggerating. I saw it. A simple correction. People love to dramatize." Naomi didn't look at him. She pressed the phone closer, listening to Victoria's calm, measured tone. "Miss Carter, we will require full confirmation before I escalate this to FAA liaison. Stay seated. Do not engage further." Tracy stood stiffly, her authority fraying at the edges. "This call is inappropriate. Passengers do not dictate operations." Naomi lowered the phone, eyes locking on Tracy's. "I don't dictate operations. I remind them who signs the checks." Sarah's chest tightened. Her fingers hovered over the tablet, the truth burning her throat. She saw the green check marks again. Undeniable. Naomi Carter wasn't lost. Naomi Carter belonged exactly where she was. The cabin had turned into a courtroom. Every silence, another testimony. Mills's voice returned over the intercom. Sharper now. All ground movement suspended until further notice. Repeat. Holding aircraft in position. The announcement rippled through the fuselage, and every passenger felt the lurch of reality. This wasn't delayed by accident. This was deliberate. Ordered. Naomi ended the call and placed the phone back into her bag, with the same calm precision she'd begun with. Amira rested her head on her mother's arm, confused but soothed by the steadiness. Tracy stared, uncomprehending, at the stillness she could no longer control. The call that followed would stop a plane mid-move. The plane had gone eerily still. Engines thrummed beneath the floor, restrained, but the announcement from Captain Mills had clipped the wings before takeoff. Naomi Carter sat in 2 amperes with her daughter curled into her side, calm as stone in a storm. The slap mark had faded to a shadow, but the room had not forgotten it. Tracy Halloway drew herself taller in the aisle. Her smile was brittle porcelain now, held together by force. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said to the cabin, her voice smoothing itself into the public announcement tone, "we apologize for the brief delay. Our crew is working to ensure the highest level of safety and service." Murmurs spread among the passengers, a tide of questions without answers. Some glanced at Naomi, some at Tracy, most pretending to stare at screens. But the silence in between was full of judgment. Naomi didn't speak. She sat straight, hands folded lightly on Amira's coloring book, her silence louder than any declaration. 3C cleared his throat and leaned across the aisle, his voice pitched for all to hear. "This is exactly why we need strong cabin leadership. Keep the standards. Otherwise, chaos." His smirk widened. "We can't just let anyone do as they please." Sarah Lynn, still clutching the manifest tablet, turned a fraction away from him. She tapped the screen again, the names glowing proof she could no longer ignore. Her lips parted, but Tracy's sharp glance froze her tongue. Instead of speaking, Sarah quietly tapped into the log, noting every exchange, Tracy's ID demands. The slap. Naomi's call. Mills's suspension order. Her fingers moved fast, documenting without permission. Each keystroke was a secret rebellion. At the front, Mills's headset crackled. "Ground Ops, Captain Mills," he said, voice steady. "Requesting independent verification for passenger Naomi Carter, seat 2 amperes. Need cross-check with shareholder database." "Copy that, Captain." came the reply. "We'll confirm." Mills leaned back in his seat, watching the feed. He saw the stillness of Naomi, the restless shifting of passengers. Tracy, pacing like a lioness, losing ground. He keyed a note into his log. Cabin control, unstable. Monitoring closely. In HQ, Victoria Reyes adjusted her chair as the log stream updated on her screen. ID checks, delay codes, manifest confirmation, Mills's independent request. She frowned. What had seemed like minor turbulence of protocol was accumulating weight. A level 2 flag, now a shareholder call, now ground ops involved. It was more than cabin noise. Tracy, unaware of the shifting tectonics above her, pressed on. She addressed the passengers again, her words crisp and pointed. "Thank you for your patience. These matters are handled for your protection. We assure you everything is under control." But her voice betrayed her. Each syllable sounded more like defense than authority. Naomi tilted her head slightly, the faintest smile ghosting her lips. She didn't rise. She didn't argue. The power was already moving, in silence. Sarah glanced sideways at Naomi, the weight of decision in her chest. She closed the log entry with a final tap. The truth was preserved now. Somewhere beyond Tracy's reach, for the first time, authority shifted in silence. The cabin air was dense. Each breath waited with anticipation. Tracy Holloway's voice had begun to fray, the controlled tone slipping toward strain. She gestured sharply at 2 attendants lingering by the galley curtain. "With me," she ordered. They followed, hesitant, their eyes darting toward Naomi Carter before vanishing behind the partition. Naomi adjusted Amira's blanket, her movements precise, deliberate, untouched by Tracy's retreat. She reached into her bag and withdrew her phone again, thumb hovering. For now, she placed it on the armrest, screen dark but threatening, like a weapon not yet unsheathed. From across the aisle, 3C seized the moment. He leaned forward, voice loud enough to ripple through every row. "You know the problem with people like her?" His gaze fixed on Naomi, his grin ugly. "They always think the rules don't apply to them." The words hung in the air, rancid, undeniable. Passengers froze, too complicit in silence to interrupt. Naomi turned, slowly, her expression unreadable. With one tap, her phone lit up, a red recording circle blooming across the glass. She lifted it just enough for the gesture to be clear. "Please," she said, voice soft but carrying. "Continue." 3C faltered, his grin stiffening. "What? What are you doing?" Naomi tilted her head. "Ensuring accuracy. You're very confident. I'd hate for the world to miss your wisdom." The smirk drained from his face. He sank back into his seat, muttering something about privacy. But too late. The damage was done. Sarah Lynn had been frozen in her jump seat, her tablet clenched to her chest. Now she rose, edging toward the curtain, heart pounding. She opened the crew log quietly and began typing. Passenger verbal harassment, row 3C. Racial undertones. Recording initiated by 2 amperes. Her fingers shook, but she didn't stop. Behind the galley curtain, Tracy's voice carried, low and sharp. "She's destabilizing the cabin. We need to close ranks, maintain authority, no exceptions." One attendant murmured back, nervous. "But the manifest is clear. She's listed correctly." "If Ops checks again." "Ops doesn't fly this plane," Tracy snapped. "We do." Sarah lingered outside, the words soaking into her. She pressed the tablet tighter, then typed again. Lead FA instructing crew to ignore manifest confirmation. Direct contradiction of log. Up front, Captain Mills leaned into the feed. He noted the sudden cluster of crew in the galley, the body language rigid, conspiratorial. His own log grew. Lead FA, mobilizing crew to enforce control, possible escalation. In HQ, Victoria Reyes frowned at her screen as Sarah's entries appeared, feeding through the automated stream. She leaned closer. A case file was building without her intervention. This wasn't a squabble, it was a liability poised to explode. Naomi's phone light caught Tracy's return as she emerged from the galley. Tracy's composure was cracked now. Her smile and imitation stretched too thin. But she didn't yet understand the mistake she'd made, the person she had chosen to corner. She had no idea who she was cornering. When Tracy Halloway stepped back into the aisle, her uniform was immaculate, but her authority was fraying at the seams. She smoothed her collar, forced a professional smile, and addressed the passengers as though nothing had cracked in the galley. "Thank you for your patience. We'll be resuming shortly," she said, the words carefully rehearsed, too brittle to convince. Naomi Carter didn't rise. She sat with a mirror pressed against her side, calm and unhurried. Her phone rested openly on the armrest, its red light still blinking. She placed her hand over it, then looked up at Tracy with eyes that cut deeper than any raised voice. "Enough," Naomi said. Her voice was steady, carrying through the hushed cabin. "We're done pretending this is about procedure." Tracy froze. "Excuse me?" Naomi straightened slightly, still seated, her words clean and sharp. "I am not only a passenger, I am a principal shareholder of this airline. Every seat in this cabin, every paycheck attached to it, my signature has touched it, and you just struck me in front of witnesses." The sentence detonated in the silence. Passengers shifted, heads turning fully now, no longer pretending not to watch. 3C's mouth fell open, color draining from his smug expression. He tried to laugh, but no sound came. Tracy blinked, faltered, then grasped for her last line of defense. "That doesn't exempt you from policy." "No," Naomi said evenly, "but it holds you to it." She lifted the phone, screen bright, evidence glowing. "And you've already broken it." Up front, Mills received the message from Ops. Shareholder verification confirmed. Passenger Naomi Carter, principal investor. Priority directive engagement required. His posture shifted instantly. He pressed the interphone. "Cabin. Cockpit," Mills said. His voice clipped but altered, no longer neutral. "Copy confirmation. Holding position pending legal clearance." Tracy's breath caught at the tone. It wasn't deference to her. It was bypassing her. Sarah Lynn's hands trembled as she pushed a file through the internal log system. The manifest, the incident notes, her observations. She added the final piece, shareholder status verified. The words pulsed green, undeniable. In HQ, Victoria Reyes straightened in her chair. "She's a shareholder," she said under her breath. She swiveled toward her team, voice firm. "Escalate to crisis mode. Full oversight. This is not a cabin dispute, it's political." Sarah glanced at Naomi as the log transmitted, her chest tightening with relief. For once, she wasn't complicit in silence. She had chosen her side. Tracy swayed, her professional mask shattering into bewilderment. Around her, the cabin leaned toward Naomi, not the uniform. 3C shrank into his seat, the smugness gone, his hand fumbling for his phone before remembering the recording red light was already on. Naomi remained still, regal in her restraint, as though nothing in her tone or posture had changed. But in that moment, the center of gravity in the room shifted entirely toward her. And Naomi hadn't even played her strongest card. The cabin was no longer Tracy Halloway's domain. Her polished smile had collapsed into silence, her posture stiff with disbelief. Naomi Carter remained seated, one arm around a mirror, the other resting lightly on the phone that glowed like a silent judge. From the cockpit, Captain Mills's voice cut through the speakers, firm and cold. "All ground movement remains suspended. Aircraft will not taxi until clearance from headquarters." The words dropped like iron across the passengers. This wasn't a minor delay. It was an order. In HQ, Victoria Reyes was already standing at the head of a small circle of legal advisors and operations staff. Her voice was clipped, decisive. "Patch me to FAA liaison now. I want real-time updates logged. This is a potential corporate breach, not just a crew dispute." Screens lit around her, timelines cascading with Sarah Lynn's entries from the cabin. The slap, the taunts, the manifest confirmation. Naomi's shareholder status. It was no longer rumor, it was evidence. Tracy clutched the interphone, her knuckles pale. "Captain, with respect, this is a crew matter. I'll regain control. Passenger disruption." Mills cut her off. "Negative. Lead. Authority has been escalated. This is no longer yours to contain." His tone was clipped, final, leaving no room for argument. Sarah sat at her jump seat, the tablet warm against her palms. She transmitted her log forward into the secure system, adding her final note: "Physical assault by lead FA confirmed. Passenger compliant. Evidence preserved." Her chest rose and fell quickly. At row 3C, the man shifted uncomfortably. His earlier swagger drained as he noticed passengers around him holding phones lower in their laps, eyes catching his face. He tapped his own device, fumbling to delete the short clip he'd recorded. But the gesture was obvious, panicked. Someone whispered, "Too late, it's already uploaded." Naomi didn't move. Her silence was heavier than Tracy's flailing words, her presence commanding without effort. Amira leaned against her shoulder, eyes half closed, soothed by her mother's stillness. In HQ, Victoria spoke into her headset, tone cutting. "Effective immediately. Emergency suspension order for lead flight attendant Holloway. Remove her from active duty before pushback. FAA liaison notified." A document popped on Mills's console seconds later, flashing in bold red. "Suspension order. Enforce immediately." "Copy that," Mills muttered. He flicked a switch, locking the command into the cockpit's secure log. Tracy's lips parted. "You can't." The intercom chimed again, Mills's voice level and merciless. "Lead FA Holloway. You are relieved of duty pending investigation. Cabin operations will be reassigned. Do not interfere further." Her eyes darted around, searching for support. But the two attendants she had dragged into the galley stared at the floor. Sarah's gaze didn't waver, her log transmitted and irreversible. 3C tried for one last defense, his voice cracking. "This is ridiculous. I can vouch." "Sir," Naomi said quietly, turning her head just enough to face him. The weight of her stare pinned him in place. He stopped speaking. The passengers around them began to murmur louder, no longer pretending neutrality. Phones were lifted, whispers caught on microphones. The truth was escaping the cabin, faster than Tracy or 3C could smother it. In HQ, Victoria scribbled a note for communications. "Prepare crisis protocol. Media will have footage within the hour." The walls of the system began to buckle. The cabin had become a theater of silence, every passenger leaning in without daring to breathe too loud. Tracy Holloway stood rigid in the aisle, her uniform crisp, but her authority shredded. Naomi Carter hadn't moved. She sat steady in 2 amperes, a mirror tucked beneath her arm, her phone still recording in its quiet red glow. Up front, Captain Mills reviewed the flashing suspension order one last time. The words were sharp, bureaucratic, unambiguous. Emergency suspension. Enforce. Immediately. His hand hovered only a second before he keyed the secure cockpit link, signing his confirmation into the system. The decision left his console and flew through encrypted channels like a verdict etched in steel. "Cabin." His voice rolled through the intercom, stripped of doubt. "This is the captain. Effective immediately. Lead flight attendant Holloway is relieved of duty. Compliance is mandatory." Gasps fluttered down the rows. Heads turned openly now, no longer pretending indifference. Tracy's lips parted, her body swaying as though the deck had shifted beneath her. "Captain, this is irregular." 2 attendants stepped from the galley, summoned by the order piped into their earpieces. They didn't meet her eyes. One spoke softly. Formal. Miss Holloway, please step aside. You're to be escorted from the cabin. No, Tracy whispered, shaking her head. Not in front of them. But the aisle had already widened with stairs. Her courtroom of passengers become a gallery of witnesses. 3C blurted. Desperate. This is a mistake. She was keeping order. His voice cracked under the sudden rise of phones pointed at him. Screens glowing like an array of tiny spotlights. One passenger muttered, "That's him, he was egging it on." Another, "I saw him recording too." 3C fumbled with his phone, thumb frantic, but the damage was done. A clip was already surfacing his smirk, his words, his laughter after the slap. He swore under his breath. Too late. Tracy's shoulders sagged as the attendants closed in, guiding her gently but firmly down the aisle. The sight was surreal. The queen of the cabin dethroned in her own aisle, her authority stripped by voices from the ground and signatures in the sky. Naomi didn't look away. She remained seated, her silence heavier than any speech. Amira watched through half-lidded eyes, too young to understand the politics, but sensing the shift. Her mother's steadiness was the only anchor she needed. The cabin door clicked open, and Tracy was led out, past the curtain, into the limbo of the jet bridge. Her absence left a hollow behind, a vacuum the room immediately felt. In HQ, Victoria Reyes leaned over her console, already on the line with communications. Confirm media holding statement. FAA is looped in. This is now a controlled crisis. Her tone was cold, decisive, unflinching. Sarah Lynn sat at her jump seat, chest still tight, but her eyes fixed on Naomi. She had watched the entire structure tilt, watched silence break power and truth bleed through the log. She knew her entries were part of the record now, irreversible. Naomi stroked her daughter's curls, still calm, still regal. She didn't need to stand. She didn't need to speak. The shift was complete, and somewhere, beyond the sealed windows, the first notifications began to ping across 1,000 phones. The clip was live, the image viral, the story already bigger than the cabin itself. The world was about to find out. By the time Flight 448's wheels touched down, the cabin scandal was no longer confined to 38 rows of seating. It was spilling across the country. The video, Tracy Holloway's hand striking Naomi Carter, 3C's smug commentary afterward, had already begun its circuit through every feed, every timeline. The quiet slap in the cabin was now a thunderclap in the public square. Screens lit in the airport before Tracy was even escorted out. News tickers scrolled beneath her frozen image. Lead flight attendant. Suspended mid-flight. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Within hours, Tracy's name was trending in the worst way. Clips showed her polished smile fracturing, the escort down the aisle, the stunned passengers looking on. The company confirmed her suspension, but the headlines didn't wait for nuance. She was the face of misconduct, the symbol of arrogance punished. 3C didn't fare better. His muttered lines, "People like her think the rules don't apply," played on loop. Online sleuths dug up his business affiliations, posted screenshots of his deleted profiles, flooded comment sections with venom. He had wanted to be seen as first-class royalty. Now he was branded a punchline. Sarah Lynn sat at a terminal in crew quarters, her uniform still crisp but her hands trembling as she refreshed her messages. The log she'd submitted had been acknowledged. Official recognition. Thank you for accurate reporting. Your role is noted as primary witness. It was more than acknowledgement. It was protection. For the first time since training, she felt her words had weight. Captain Mills was summoned into the FAA's post-incident call within hours. His calm log, the exact timeline of cabin events, became the spine of the investigation. He read each line without flourish, his voice steady, detached. The committee asked nothing about emotion, only sequence. And Mills gave them sequence in unbreakable detail. His record would become the technical backbone against which the scandal unfolded. At headquarters, Victoria Reyes sat beneath two bright lights in a polished conference room, facing journalists and regulators. She didn't flinch. "We acknowledge systemic failure," she said evenly. This was not an isolated lapse. This was the result of a culture that permitted silence to function as policy. That culture ends here. Cameras flashed. Her face would be replayed, almost as much as Tracy's. But where Tracy's collapse became spectacle, Victoria's admission became the promise of reform. And at the center, Naomi Carter remained almost silent. She declined interviews, she offered no statements. She stepped out of the airport with her daughter's hand in hers and disappeared into a waiting car. Yet her silence spoke louder than any press release. Media anchors repeated her name with reverence. Her stillness portrayed as strength. She had turned the cabin into a courtroom and walked away without defending herself once. The scandal churned on, networks replaying the footage with grim fascination. But in the commentary, in the hearings, in the corporate mea culpas, a new narrative surfaced. Naomi hadn't just been a passenger. She was the lever that pried the system open. And yet, the true legacy was not the viral slap or the ruined reputations. But the real legacy wasn't the scandal, it was the rewrite. 3 weeks later, the airport had the same polished floors and the same weary announcements, but the air felt different, as if the building had learned a new word and couldn't stop whispering it. Naomi Carter guided Amira past a bakery window, where sugar curled on warm pastry like frost. The child's hand fit inside hers, smaller now, only because memory made that night feel so large. "Do we sit by the wing again?" Amira asked, skipping one tile and landing on the next, like a game only she knew. "If the wing behaves itself," Naomi said. A new placard read, "Passenger Dignity Protocol in effect. Report excessive force or discrimination through this QR code." People scanned it idly as if it were a menu. They reached the gate to find a different kind of hush. The calm that follows a storm that didn't drift out to sea so much as sit down and apologize. Captain Mills stood by the counter in his pressed uniform, hat tucked under his arm, speaking with a gate agent. He saw them before they saw him. "Miss Carter," he said, stepping forward. His voice had the same low ballast as that evening, only warmer at the edges. "Ma'am, that was one flight I won't forget." Naomi inclined her head. "I imagine the FAA won't either. Nor my students," he said. At her look, he added, "Training module. They gave me a classroom for a month." A dry pause. "Long month." Amira peered up at him. "Are we on your plane?" "We are," he said, then corrected himself with a small smile. "You are. I'm only borrowing it." Past the glass, the aircraft rested at the gate like a large, obedient animal. The jet bridge extended toward it with the unhurried certainty of a handshake. "Boarding first class," the agent announced. The cabin welcomed them not with lavender and hush, but with the absence of dread. The layout was the same, the surfaces gleaming, but something invisible had been edited. The seat placards bore small braille tags. The crew interphone near the galley had a new seal, all calls autologged. Sarah Lynn stood at the door in a blazer that fit her like she had chosen it and not inherited it. Her hair was pulled back clear of her eyes. She didn't flinch when she saw Naomi. She brightened, but then sobered, as if remembering her job was not to make friends, but to keep promises. "Welcome aboard, Miss Carter." "Amira." She crouched slightly to meet the child's eyes. "Do you want the window or the aisle?" "Window," Amira said immediately, then added, quieter, "Please." "Window it is." Sarah straightened. "If you need me, I'll be here. And if you don't, I'll still be here." Naomi studied her for a heartbeat. "Congratulations," she said. "For what?" "For not blinking." Sarah's mouth twitched. I blinked a lot. I just wrote it down afterward. They moved to 2 amperes and 2B without anyone performing disbelief. A man in 3C scrolled through his phone, uninterested, because he wasn't the same man, and the roll had been retired. The overhead bin slid shut with a soft thump. The air vent sighed. Everything ordinary became a small relief. From the intercom, Mills's voice flowed across the cabin. "Good afternoon, folks. We're number 2 for departure. Flight time today is 2 hours and 50 minutes. You may notice some changes to our pre-flight briefing. Please listen. They're for all of us." Sarah took the aisle mic. Her delivery was crisp, unhurried. In addition to our standard safety procedures, our airline has implemented a passenger dignity protocol. Discrimination and unnecessary force are prohibited and reportable. Our crew communications are recorded. Should you have concerns, contact any crew member or the captain directly. We're here to get you there, safely and without humiliation. She met Naomi's gaze. For just a breath. "Thank you for flying with us." A few passengers clapped once, softly, as if testing the acoustics of a new room. At headquarters, hundreds of miles away, Victoria Reyes leaned over a conference table strewn with drafts and signatures. The policy packet sat beneath her hand. She added the final flourish of ink, not theatrical, just final. "Effective immediately," she told the room. "Training, reporting, enforcement. No soft launches, no pilot programs. We build the thing we said we would." Someone asked a question about budget. She didn't look up. "We already paid for it the night we didn't stop it." Her phone buzzed. A boarding photo from the station manager. A glimpse of Naomi buckling Amira in. Sarah at the door. Mills on the PA. Victoria allowed herself a single private nod. Then she slid the signed packet to legal and reached for the next file. Back on the aircraft, Amira traced the wing again, with one finger against the window. "The clouds will be in pieces," she said, trying out a memory like a new word. "They always are," Naomi replied. She fastened her belt. The mark on her cheek had vanished, but another kind of imprint remained, one that didn't bruise. Sarah passed with water, set a plastic cup on the armrest, for takeoff, in case the altitude negotiates back. "It usually wins," Naomi said. "Not always," Sarah said. "Sometimes we write the rules." Mills's announcement returned, the way good captains speak when they know they're babysitting not only a route but a story. "Cabin, prepare for departure." Seatbelts clicked in a staccato rhythm. The jet bridge rolled away. And, for a second, Naomi watched the gap widen where a door had once been a stage, where a hand had fallen, where a camera had glowed. Nothing like that lived there now. Just air and light and a routine done right. The plane pushed back. Engines swelled. Amira leaned into Naomi. Sleepy already. Certain in ways children either are or aren't. Sarah stood steady at her jump seat, eyes forward. In HQ, Victoria's signature dried. In the cockpit, Mills guided them to the line, without hurry or apology. "Power doesn't need permission to walk back through the door. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. If you're still here, it means you've been holding your breath through every moment of tension and every twist in the cabin. That's exactly why we love creating these stories. For listeners who want to sit in the middle of the drama, feel the silence, and hear the truth break through. We've got plenty more stories coming your way, each one built with the same edge, the same energy, and the same I can't stop listening feeling. So if you don't want to miss what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. It's the simplest way to stay connected and the fastest way to know when the next chapter of our world drops. Stay tuned, because the skies aren't done telling their secrets.